Welcome to our Friday live stream. This week in Cannabis News, powered by Dutchie. Each Friday at 10 a.m. Eastern, we'll deliver an overview of this week's cannabis news. It's quick, it's comprehensive, and it sends you into the weekend as a more informed cannabis professional. And it's all made possible by our friends and partners at Dutchie. You can find and connect with the team there through a link in the show notes. Now let's get to it. On Thursday, a key congressional committee advanced a bill that would effectively close the loophole and federally prohibit all consumable intoxicating products derived from hemp. The House Appropriations Subcommittee on Agriculture, Rural Development, Food and Drug Administration, and related agencies is chaired by Republican Maryland Representative Andy Harris, who is a longtime opponent of federal cannabis reform. In a press release, Harris said closing the loophole would support President Donald Trump's agenda by halting the proliferation of unregulated intoxicating hemp products, including Delta-8 and hemp flower, being sold online and in gas stations across the country. More from D.C. The Food and Drug Administration expanded its anti-cannabinoid stance in a warning letter to the owners of Dozo, which is an online retailer that sells products containing a variety of cannabinoids beyond just THCA and Delta-9 THC. In the letter, they wrote, "We know of no basis to conclude that any use of food in cannabinoid, plant-derived or otherwise, would be safe and lawful. For some cannabinoids, such as Delta-8 THC, the available data raise serious concerns about potential harm." And if that wasn't enough hemp news, following this segment of the program, I'll share a conversation I had yesterday with reporter Chris Casacchia, who wrote this week for Cultivated about venture capital and private equity investments into the hemp-derived THC beverage space. So hold tight for that. The 24-member North Carolina Advisory Council on Cannabis, which Governor Josh Stein created through executive order on Wednesday, will recommend how the state should move forward with cannabis policy. North Carolina is one of the very few states left in the country that does not even allow medical cannabis, which has left the door open for a vibrant yet unregulated hemp-derived market. The commission is supposed to begin meeting in July in order to submit policy recommendations by March 15th, 2026. Now to my home state of Massachusetts. H4187, which is now resides in the Senate, it's a House bill which now resides in the Senate, would reshape regulations in Massachusetts, including reducing the size and restructuring of the Cannabis Control Commission, remove the requirement that medical licensees be vertically integrated, increase the daily purchase limit from 1 ounce to 2 ounce, increase the cap on retail ownership from 3 stores to 6, and re-legalize hemp drinks sold outside of dispensaries with no more than 5 milligrams of THC. The bill comes after at least 2 years of turmoil on the commission and corrects some of the commission's past actions while advancing other ones that have stalled under the current leadership. And speaking of leadership, to New York, where New York Governor Kathy Hochul has nominated Cannabis Control Board member Jessica Garcia to replace current chair Tremaine Wright. Earlier this year, the governor's budget proposal included replacing the chair's salary with a much smaller stipend, similar to what other state board members receive. The Senate is expected to vote on Garcia's nomination today. This week, our official insights partners at Lit Alerts shared details about which brands are selling in which categories in the great state of Missouri. Here is a chart which Lit Alerts noted has some homegrown brands like Codes, Good Day Farms, Proper, and Illicit, as well as some national brands, including Gran and Rove. And one fun thing to end your week, cannabis brand Jeter is partnering with Jay and Silent Bob to launch Bluntman's Chronic, a limited edition, hash-infused pre-roll dropping today alongside a new National Lampoon movie short called The Donut Shop. The collab blends stoner nostalgia and comedy, obviously, with an in-store appearance by Kevin Smith and Jason Mewes, set for June 9th in Hollywood. And later, a matching Jeter apparel drop rounds out the campaign. And that's the news this week in cannabis, and as promised, I'm sharing a conversation I had this week with Chris Casacchia, formerly of MJ Biz, and now working on some important work for the team here at Cultivated. He wrote this story this week for Cultivated, and we wanted to connect with him to dive deeper. Here's Chris Casacchia. Chris, thanks for joining us.
Thank you for having me back, Jay. It's been a minute.
It's been a minute, and thank you for joining us. There's joining us. There's a lot baked into that, and we'll get to that. Obviously, many or most people know you from MJ Biz, your work there, which was stellar, of course. Now you are on doing your own thing, and you were doing your own thing this week with us for the first time, but hopefully more down the road. So great to see you, and great to see your name as a byline as well.
Yeah, great to be back here for sure, and great to see that friendly beard.
Well, it's funny. I'm getting it trimmed tomorrow, but
okay.
I try. It's not against my will that I get the beard trimmed, but if it was only me, it would be much, much longer. Okay. I guess let's say that.
I got you.
That said, earlier this week, I'm going to bring it up. We posted this story, which you wrote. VCs and private equity investors are fueling the potentially $20 billion low-dose THC beverage boom. This is largely, of course, around hemp-based beverages, of course,
yep.
And hemp-derived beverages, which has also been in the news this week with folks in Congress some of them looking to close what they're calling the hemp loophole. We can call it whatever we want, but that's what they're looking to close. So it came at a very timely time, I guess. But talk about what you wrote about, but also the context in which you wrote it, because this has been, one of the key conversations that you and I've been having and the industry's been having for almost daily for a year.
I think one of the first important notes is just to point out that, there are investors still actively looking at this space. Of course, we had that big green rush of investors who, of course, poured in hundreds of millions of dollars in the early days of legalization in certain states, of course, on this hope and promise, at least to a lot of investors, that, of course, we would see mass legalization here in the United States. Of course, we know where we're at in that conversation. But now we've had, 2018 is when the Farm Bill was passed to include hemp products. We're not going to discuss what was meant when, legislators first enacted these laws. But essentially, no doubt, it created an opening and a legality for federally compliant hemp products. Of course, 3% THC, dry weight. So basically you had this open door. And of course, since then, the market has really been proliferated with literally hundreds and thousands of different types of low-dose THC products. And we know kind of the concerns that comes with an unregulated marketplace, of course, and that's, of course, why, lawmakers are looking at this, and if they've enacted, some of these restrictions and outright bans in various states. But of course, a lot of states do not have these prohibitions. Some states are even actually working hemp products into their regulated cannabis market, like Minnesota, which is kind of like the ideal test case that we're all kind of looking at as they kind of roll out their adult use program, sometime next year, it looks like, even though we hoped it would be this year. So in this, because of, really it's been pushed by consumers. There's been all these, consumer shifts that have gone on, relatively in the last 5 years. So it's been a really short period of time where there's been these massive shifts. Of course, alcohol consumption is going down in every single demographic. That is no doubt. Cannabis consumption, is actually on the rise. More people are using cannabis, but again, combustion, smoking joints, smoking bowls, smoking bongs, especially the younger demographic, are not doing this. They're, combustion is not part of their, cannabis consumption lifestyle. And, because of these different factors and some other and many more, you've had this opportunity for drinks. And we've been talking about cannabis drinks for years, and they've never really taken on any kind of, sizable or influential role in retail. And we're talking about dispensary retail, because for the most part, I think
that's the key, right? Yeah.
Yes. I mean, that's really the most, until recently, that's kind of where these drinks have been available. And for a lot of reasons, it has just not worked on retail. The consumers are different who go to buy these drinks and have these drinks than typical dispensary consumers. And retail is just, they're not really built to hold bulk inventory, especially, 12-ounce cans. They're heavy. They take up a lot of space. It just doesn't make a lot of sense. So in that time, of course, hemp-derived, since they're federally legal, you've had some major national retailers across the United States, Total Wine, thinking of the Total Wines, regional players like Binny's Beverage in the Midwest, who have basically said, we're going to start selling this. It's federally compliant. And just anecdotally, you've kind of seen shelves. I've been talking to investors, talking to distributors. That category is growing, and I think that is undeniable. The thing is that it's so hard to get data around a lot of these products, especially when you talk about hemp-derived. There really is no regulator of data. There's no holding, there's no holding house of data. So all of this is kind of very anecdotal. But talking to investors, what we know for sure, as we pointed out in our story this week, there is tens of millions of dollars actively chasing low beverage THC plays across the United States in a lot of different categories. We've kind of thought about the seltzers, the world, but again, evolution is happening. You're going to see more, varieties, more categories. You're going to see kind of like the spritzes of the world, different types of flavored drinks kind of work into this really kind of, almost like a fourth style of drink that goes beyond beer, liquor, wine. I mean, I think this is kind of a new evolution of it. And not only that, it is hitting in so many different demographics right now, where you're getting folks that are, weaning themselves off of alcohol, the older generation. Younger generation is not drinking alcohol, but they still like that social aspect. Drinking is very social, low THC. It's very discreet. You can be outside and kind of, no one can really know what you're drinking. So there's a lot of factors that are kind of baking into this. But there's no doubt investors are looking deep and hard at this category. And some of them believe that, and we've kind of had this conversation about brands and global brands in cannabis. And there's an argument to be made that cookies may be the only one that even exists. But there's, some folks believe that the brand may actually win out in the end in the beverage category, because it's just such a different category than what we're used to, and let's just call it, the regulated cannabis space.
It's interesting because I think back even over the past, 6 months, 6 months for sure, maybe even over these 6 weeks, we've had on folks on our programs, Cantrip and Rebel Rabbit, talking about their brands and how they look to expand. We know that edibles.com got into the delivery business around this exact category with some of those brands as well. Previously, within the past year, certainly Theory Wellness opened a dispensary model in Massachusetts that was only beverages, not hemp-derived beverages, but traditional cannabis industry beverages, because there's this sense that people will buy beverages that have THC in them. The thing that holding them back in large respects is the dispensary model, right? The traditional model. We've also had on 2 weeks ago, Boston Beer Company, which has cannabis beverages here in Canada, but not in the States because they're publicly listed on NASDAQ, I think. So it seems to be driving not just, hemp-derived conversation. The consumer saying yes to hemp-derived THC products is impacting the traditional cannabis industry and regulators on the state level, regulators on the federal level. There is this interesting push that normalizing buying this in a traditional channel, liquor stores, breweries in Minnesota, opens up a whole new market. And I would add, and want to get your feedback, the sky hasn't fallen anywhere. Not that regulation may not be needed, but the sky has not fallen.
Absolutely, that is very true. You listed these big players, DoorDash, another right. Giant tech giant getting into this category, and we've seen just in their first month of selling, sales were up over 20%, and they made kind of this eye-opening announcement that they'd start carrying these drinks. And just talking to investors, a lot of them believe that this is the path, and this is why there's so many contradictions and conflictions when we talk about cannabis and what happens in policy and consumerism. A lot of them feel like drinks, low dose, is going to be the way towards normalization and mainstreaming cannabis, which what we've been talking about for years and years and years. How is this going to happen? And there's a lot of folks that are putting millions of dollars behind this thesis that low dose drinks are actually going to be what's going to lead to mainstream adoption, acceptance, et cetera. Now, we've already seen some music venues. There's a Salt Shed in my hometown of Chicago. They're working with Green Thumb Industries to basically, they allow low dose hemp-derived beverage sales there. Music festivals are starting to, okay low dose THC bevs. So we're already kind of seeing this gate finally come down. Even though we know we go to a concert, you're going to smell weed, you're going to smoke weed, but it's certainly not allowed. We know that, and there could be some type of ramifications. You might get booted out. You might, they might, I mean, there's other issues, but they're certainly not blanketing, green lighting it like what has happened in the low dose bev space. And I think it's just so, and it's what another thing that's really interesting is you're seeing traditional elk players, breweries get into not only the canning of this, and we kind of saw this, it's kind of fascinating what happened during COVID. A lot of companies kind of changed their model on the dime because, they needed to be in business and they needed to do something. So in COVID, a lot of these companies started to make, different types of cleansers and, infrastructure was used differently. And this is kind of what we're seeing right now in craft beer. I'm a huge craft beer fan. You're seeing craft breweries get in on this, not only the canning of, so now this is turning into a bigger industry, a cottage industry where you're actually, utilizing ancillary service providers, AKA manufacturers. Mm-hmm. So now they're getting involved in this sector, and they're not only canning it, some of these breweries are of course now making non-elk, which we know now, of course, is another growing category. And now they're making low dose THC bevs, and we're kind of seeing this kind of now play out. So there's considering all the we don't know what's on the horizon with the federal government and how they're going to treat this. We know some states are certainly taking action, have taken action, but there's no doubt that this is one of the growth categories, and this is one of these success stories that is without a doubt, it really can't be argued right now in the space when, the cannabis industry needs good stories right now, and they're hard to come by.
Yeah, no, it's fascinating. And the conversation is not going to end today. It's going to continue on. Certainly as DC takes up this issue, certainly as more states either welcome or try to ban or some combination therein, or move it from its own sort of separate vertical into the traditional market. And we're glad to have you on board to help us tell this story to our readers. I was telling you before we came on that it was one of our biggest days of subscriptions, maybe of the year. People coming to read your story, giving us their email address and getting our newsletter in their inbox every day. And either we were doing a crappy job or you're doing a great job, or maybe a little bit of both to get those subscription numbers up. So we appreciate, of course, the story. Appreciate you having you on the squad. And thanks for making time. I would encourage everybody, if they haven't already, I'm going to put this up on the screen again. You can get what Chris wrote on our newsletter, of course, but also get the newsletter inbox every single day. And there it is. And Chris, I look forward to the next story, and thanks for making time today.
Yeah, Jay, appreciate your time. I'm so happy to hear about the subscription, man. I love what you guys have been doing all this time. I appreciate you. And I thank you guys from what you're doing from a journalism standpoint, because we need more good journalism in this space.
Amen to that. And more good work. All
right, buddy. Talk later.
Thank you, Chris, and thank all of you for joining us here today. Thank you, Lit Alerts, for your partnership and exclusive insights, and especially thank you to our friends at Dutchie for making this show possible each week. How you can find them and their team is in the show notes. And you can find all of these stories and much, much more on cultivated.news. We'd also love for you to follow us on LinkedIn and our YouTube channel to stay connected on socials. Check back here next Friday, 10 a.m. Eastern, right here for This Week in Cannabis News, powered by Dutchie. Have a good and safe weekend, everybody.